I sat on the floor, tears streaming down my face, not for the love we lost, but for the love I still feel, even though you're no longer here to receive it. The tears weren't about losing you, they were about the realization that sometimes the hardest thing is not to be enough for someone, no matter how deeply you care. As I cried, I thought of all the moments we shared and wondered if you ever think of them too, or if I've already faded into the background of your life. I sat on the floor and cried, not because I was sad, but because I was finally ready to let go of the past and embrace the future, no matter how uncertain it seemed. Crying for you was an act of releasing everything I had held on to for so long. It wasn't about regret, but about understanding that some things are meant to be let go of, no matter how hard it is. I sat on the floor and cried for you, but also for the strength I found in myself to move forward, even when it felt like I was losing everything. I cried for the love we had, but more than that, I cried for the love I'm learning to give myself. The love I've needed all along but never knew how to find. In the silence of my room, I cried not because I missed you, but because I finally understood that sometimes the best thing we can do for someone is to let them go. Sitting on the floor, tears falling, I realized that not all love stories are meant to have happy endings, and sometimes the ending is just another beginning for both people. I cried for the person I was when I loved you, and for the person I am becoming now, stronger and more whole, even without you by my side. The tears I shed weren't about you leaving, they were about realizing that I could survive without you, that I could find peace in the absence of what once was. Sitting alone, I let my tears fall, knowing that with each one, I was releasing something precious, the love, the memories, and the hope that someday things could be different. I cried for the moments we shared, for the love that I thought would last forever, and for the understanding that some things, no matter how beautiful, are only meant to be for a season. I sat on the floor and cried, not because of regret, but because of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the love experienced, and for the person I've become because of you. As I cried, I realized that letting go doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It simply means you stop waiting for them to come back and choose to love yourself instead. The tears I shed weren't a sign of weakness, but a symbol of the love I once gave and the peace I'm learning to find in moving forward. Crying on the floor, I understood that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that don't have happy endings because they teach us how to love ourselves more. I sat there, tears falling, knowing that even though we weren't meant to be, our love still shaped me in ways I'll never forget. I cried because love is complicated, and sometimes the people we love don't stay. But that doesn't mean the love was never real. It just means it wasn't meant to last forever. As I sat on the floor, I realized that crying wasn't just about the pain of losing you, but about the realization that I am strong enough to move forward with or without you. I cried for the love we once shared, but also for the understanding that sometimes people grow apart, and the most loving thing we can do is set each other free. Sitting alone in my room, I realized that crying for you was my way of healing, of letting go of what wasn't meant to be and accepting what the future holds. I cried because, even in your absence, you were still a part of me, a part I had to let go of in order to move forward and become the person I'm meant to be. I sat on the floor, tears streaming, not because I was weak, but because I was finally strong enough to acknowledge the love I had and the strength I need to move on. Crying for you was the last act of love I could give, a final release of the pain, the memories, and the feelings that no longer serve me. As I cried, I realized that some loves are meant to teach us valuable lessons, and the most important lesson was learning to love myself, even after losing you. Sitting on the floor, I cried not for the loss of you, but for the person I became while loving you, and the strength I found in letting go. I cried not for the love we lost, but for the love that still remains, not for you, but for the lessons and growth I've gained along the way. The tears I shed were a mixture of sorrow and relief, understanding that sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go and trust that better things await. I sat on the floor, crying, realizing that loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them. Sometimes it means letting them go and trusting in the love you have for yourself. I sat on the floor of my room and cried for you, not just for the love we shared, but for the pieces of myself I gave away, hoping they'd find a place in your heart. Now I realize that sometimes giving all we have doesn't fill the void of what we truly need. The tears that fell were more than sorrow. They were fragments of memories I couldn't quite hold on to, but still clung to, as though losing you meant losing a part of who I am. As I sat on the floor, overwhelmed by the silence of my empty room, I cried because I wanted to understand why the love we had slipped through my fingers like sand, always just beyond my reach. I thought my heart was strong enough to handle the silence that followed your absence. But as I sat on the floor, I realized that no amount of strength could mend a broken connection once it's been torn apart. Crying on the floor, I realized that the space we once shared isn't filled with anger, but with a deep ache of longing for a love that was never fully realized, never fully embraced. I sat on the floor of my room and cried for you because I didn't understand why what we had faded. I had hoped, more than anything, that our love would endure the test of time. Yet, here I am, drowning in thoughts of you and what we could have been. The tears were not just for the lost moments, but for the realization that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it takes more than just two people. It takes timing, understanding, and an alignment that was never meant to be. In the quiet of my room, I cried for the things I never said, the love I never fully expressed, and the dreams we built together that now feel like distant memories. I sat there, feeling the weight of my tears, wondering if you ever felt the same way about me. Did you ever miss me the way I miss you? Or was I just another chapter in your story that you quickly closed? Crying for you, sitting on the floor, I felt the weight of every unsaid word, every moment left unshared, as though time had stolen pieces of us that we could never reclaim. My heart ached for you, and as I sat on the floor, I realized that sometimes the hardest part isn't losing someone, but realizing that they might never come back. I cried for the things we never had, the moments we never shared, and the future we never built. In that silence, I found only the echoes of what could have been. Sitting alone on the floor, I cried not just for you, but for the version of myself I left behind in the spaces we shared, hoping it would be enough to make you stay. As I cried, I let myself feel everything: the grief, the love, the hope, and the pain of knowing that I gave my all. But sometimes, even that isn't enough to keep two souls together. I sat there, surrounded by memories, and realized that the hardest part wasn't losing you, but watching you leave without understanding the depth of what we shared. I cried because I thought I was strong enough to let you go, but the heart has its own way of holding on to things even when they're no longer meant for us. Sitting in the silence of my room, I cried not just for the end of us, but for the quiet moments that slipped away unnoticed, the moments when we were everything to each other. In my tears, I found the remnants of a love that once burned so bright, but slowly faded as we drifted apart. I wish I could have held on longer, but sometimes love simply isn't enough. I sat on the floor, letting the tears fall, not because I wanted you back, but because I finally understood that the love we had was a lesson, a beautiful chapter in my life that's now closed. I cried for all the what ifs and if onlys, for the love we built and lost, for the way our paths diverged, each tear a reminder that not all loves are meant to last. As I sat on the floor, I thought of you, and I realized that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go, even when your heart is screaming to hold on. Crying for you was never about regret. It was about acknowledging that some things aren't meant to be, and the only choice left is to release them and move on. I sat on the floor, the tears a silent tribute to the love we once had. And as I cried, I realized that sometimes the only way to heal is to let yourself mourn what could have been. In the quiet of my room, I cried for you, not because I was angry or bitter, but because I had loved you with all of my heart. And now I had to find a way to love myself again. I sat there, overwhelmed by the weight of everything unsaid, the dreams shattered, and the love we shared that now feels like a distant echo in the vastness of time. I cried because you were a part of my heart that I couldn't fully understand. And now that you're gone, all I have left are the questions that linger in the silence.